Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about the 2023 Met Gala controversy, the fact that Adidas is now being sued because of Kanye West, and the Wes Anderson TikTok trend that has been blowing up. So first up, tonight's Met Gala is once again going to be an extravagant event, attended by some of fashion's elite and New York high society. But this year's theme has already turned out to be extremely controversial. The event will be honoring the late Karl Lagerfeld, the German fashion designer, creative director, artist, and photographer. The dress code is essentially going to be a tribute to him and his legacy, which is a decision that many people have called into question. Karl Lagerfeld will forever be known as a fashion icon and influential designer. He was at the helm of Chanel for over 3 decades, as well as designing for Fendi and his own label, but he was also known for his complete lack of filter, and he had no issue sharing his problematic views. Some of these views were considered fat-phobic, misogynistic, and racist. Karl had a history of openly criticizing women's bodies, especially if they didn't fit into the beauty standards of high fashion. Not even celebrities were safe from his commentary. He once called Adele too fat and Heidi Klum too heavy. He also mocked movements like the body positivity movement and made some pretty outrageous claims about eating disorders. For instance, in a 2009 interview with Focus magazine, he straight up said that no one wants to see curvy women and that the only people complaining about thin models were bigger women. That same year, in an interview with Harper's Bazaar, he said that Coco Chanel wasn't ugly enough to be a feminist. Aside from holding up thin ideals, Karl was also strongly against the Me Too movement. In 2018, he said, "I'm fed up with it. What shocks me most in all of this are the starlets who have taken 20 years to remember what happened." He also defended fellow designers who were accused, like Carl Templer, the creative director at Interview magazine. At the time, he said that he didn't believe a single word of it and claimed that the models should pursue other professions if they don't want to deal with something similar. Quote, "A girl complained that he tried to pull her pants down, and he is instantly excommunicated from a profession that up until then had venerated him. It's unbelievable. If you don't want your pants pulled about, don't become a model. Join a nunnery. There will always be a place for you in a convent." Karl's controversial beliefs also extended to his opinion on LGBTQ rights. His view on same-sex marriage has always been a little murky. In 2010, he suggested that he was against it, and then a few years later, he expressed support, although he never believed that gay couples should be allowed to adopt children. But despite his history of making these offensive comments, the fashion industry never really made a move against him. In fact, they still embraced him as a creative genius and were willing to overlook a lot of things he said just for the sake of his art. But that sentiment might already be changing. One of Karl's biggest critics is undoubtedly Jameela Jamil. When the theme was announced in October, she called out the Met Gala on Twitter. She wrote, "This man was indeed supremely talented, but used his platform in such a distinctly hateful way, mostly towards women, so repeatedly and up to the last years of his life, showing no remorse, offering no atonement, no apology, no help to the groups that he attacked. There was no explanation for his cruel outbursts." Jameela went on to list the ways in which she believed that Karl was problematic and unhelpful to certain social movements. She said, "Why is this who we celebrate when there are so many amazing designers out there who aren't bigoted white men? What happened to everyone's principles and advocacy? You don't get to stand for justice in these areas and then attend the celebration of someone who's revealed his own public disdain for marginalized people." And just 2 weeks before the event, the team behind the high fashion Twitter Met Gala account said that they would not be covering it just because of the theme. They sent out a tweet saying, "As we approach the first Monday of May, the HF Twitter Met Gala team would like to announce that we will not be celebrating this year's Met Gala, as our values don't align with the selection of Karl Lagerfeld as the theme." The account coordinator spoke to Time magazine about the decision. She said, "A lot of us are actually part of the communities that Karl Lagerfeld has targeted in his hateful speech, and a lot of the people who participate in our event are part of those communities as well. It's not that we're not acknowledging his legacy, and we're not denying it either, but part of his legacy are the harmful things that he's said and done. We don't really want to partake in celebrating that." But even though more and more people are now speaking out against the theme, it's clear that the Met Gala plans to go ahead with celebrating the designer, which means that this year, all eyes will be on the red carpet to see how celebrities interpret his complicated legacy. They might choose to put his career in a positive light or make a more subversive statement. It's too early to tell what's going to happen, so let's just sit tight and see how it all goes down. Alright, and there's officially more bad news for Adidas. Did you know that they're getting sued over their involvement with Kanye West? Investors are now claiming that the company was aware of his problematic behavior and they failed to take precautionary measures to limit financial losses if the partnership were to end. According to the complaint, executives at Adidas knew about the risks of the partnership, and they discussed it as far back as 2018, about 4 years before they were forced to cut ties with the rapper. Investors claim that in that annual report, Adidas ignored some obvious issues with the partnership and hid the potential risk to shareholders. They did this by generally alluding to the risks rather than coming clean and saying that they were actually concerned about Kanye's personal behavior. Apparently, the rapper also made anti-Semitic marks in front of Adidas staff years before he made them publicly, and they chose not to tell anyone about this. The Wall Street Journal published a report on this and claimed that senior executives spoke about how to mitigate the risk of staff interacting with him. So it was completely possible that the company was well aware of his extreme behavior and routinely ignored it for years. As we know, Adidas cut ties with Kanye in October after he made a series of anti-Semitic remarks. At the time, they released a statement saying, "Ye's recent comments and actions have been unacceptable, hateful, and dangerous, and they violate the company's values of diversity and inclusion, mutual respect, and fairness." But since then, the company have launched an internal investigation after it was reported that Kanye created a toxic work environment. In an open letter, several staff members claimed that their bosses were aware of his problematic behavior, but they chose to turn off their moral compass. In response, Adidas said that it was not clear whether these accusations were even true, but they insisted that they would take it very seriously and launch an independent investigation into the matter. But we already know that there is some truth to this. In October, the rapper posted a 30-minute long video on YouTube called Last Week. Around 10 minutes into the video, you could see Kanye sitting down with Adidas executives inside an empty room. He was holding his phone horizontally in front of them and showing them a video. After several seconds, the men start to realize that he's actually showing them an X-rated movie. They were obviously getting uncomfortable, and one of them even said, "Jesus Christ, come on man, come on." But despite their reaction, Kanye continues to hold his phone close to their faces. So what was the point of this whole thing? Well, he was apparently trying to draw some kind of parallel between how they felt watching the video and how he feels when they steal his ideas. And judging by all their reactions, they seemed like they were used to dealing with this kind of unprofessional behavior from him. So it's possible that they knew about his views all along. But in response to this latest lawsuit, the company is denying any culpability. They released a statement saying, "We outright reject these unfounded claims and will take all necessary measures to vigorously defend ourselves against them." Well, regardless of who is at fault, investors clearly need someone to blame for this failed partnership. Since cutting ties with Kanye, the company has bled millions of dollars. As it stands, Adidas is projected to lose $750 million this year, which will be their first annual loss in 31 years. And this all comes down to whether or not they are able to repurpose all these unsold Yeezy products, of course without Kanye's name and branding on them. For instance, it was suggested that selling the sneakers under their own branding would save them about $300 million in royalty payments. So there is a potential for them to be able to do this with the other Yeezy inventory as well. The CEO released a statement saying that 2023 will be considered a transition year for the company, as they hope to become profitable again in 2024. He said, "Adidas has all the ingredients to be successful, but we need to put our focus back on our core: product, consumers, retail partners, and athletes. The numbers speak for themselves. We are currently not performing the way we should. We need to put the pieces back together again, but I'm convinced that over time we will make Adidas shine." Alright, now if you're a fan of Wes Anderson's movies, you need to see this new TikTok trend. His films are super impressive that it's so hard to imagine anyone effectively replicating them. But believe it or not, this new trend has been going around on TikTok, and it proves that anyone can actually nail his signature style. People have taken inspiration from his movies and they want to try and romanticize their ordinary activities. The results are actually mind-blowing. On TikTok, the hashtag Wes Anderson has achieved almost 600 million views, and these videos have drawn tens of thousands of views each, and in some cases they've drawn millions. What's so incredible is how well they capture the eccentric style of Wes Anderson's movies, with its distinctive color palettes and overall quirkiness. The best part about it is the videos will often feature everyday events, like commuting to work, having lunch with a friend, or just making a sandwich. But when these moments get edited in the right way, it looks like there's something straight out of a cinema. It starts off with the hilarious prompt like, "Please don't act like you're in a Wes Anderson film today." Then of course, the creators proceed to do just that. The trend brings out the best part of the director's projects, which always have such a specific, aesthetically pleasing look, and that really makes them stand out among the rest. From the composition of each shot to the way the films are edited, it's incredibly distinctive. Luckily, you don't have to be a film fanatic to edit your life Wes Anderson style. it's actually pretty easy to replicate. So here are a few tips to make your video as accurate as possible. The general rule of thumb is that everything needs to be whimsical, like the color grading, the set design, and quirky costuming. You can then add in things like symmetrical shots and playful music. The only thing you really need is a cell phone and some basic editing software. For instance, Anderson likes to create interest through stillness, which means you want to keep the camera as static as possible to replicate his style. So you might like to avoid any camera movements that are way too quick and messy, like panning from one thing to another. Also, we don't see a lot of angle shots in his movies, so it's best to point the camera straight at the subject and keep everything else straight and symmetrical. If anything, this trend just proves that you don't need fancy camera equipment or storybook locations to start romanticizing things in your life. Over the course of his career, Anderson has cultivated an instantly recognizable visual style, which has earned him hordes of admirers over the years. But his movies are not just aesthetically pleasing, they also tell a really good story. A lot of them are about misfits finding their place, which can take the form of coming-of-age stories or even stories about a midlife crisis. And sometimes putting these different stages of life side by side in the same movie makes it more of a parallel narrative. His projects usually have an element of comedy with tragedy weaved in, and this works really well with that classic deadpan delivery and absurd character designs. To date, he has made around 22 movies, and he prefers to work with some of the same cast members repeatedly. So there are a lot of factors that go into making Wes Anderson's work what it is today. The question is, do you think that his films can be replicated by just anyone, or not at all? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.